Okay, so I have end-to-end testing with Cypress for you today. Just wanted to give you a small introduction to what Cypress is and how we can use it, and how you guys and how we as Kyan can benefit from doing end-to-end testing on different projects, and whenever figuring out if Cypress is a good choice or not, and how it works and so on. So just to kind of dive into the whole concept, why is testing important? And I think there are like two main things that stand out for me personally, from the experience of the projects that I had, that I worked on, which used testing, and some of them that didn't use testing at the beginning, but at some point we started using testing and how we benefited from it. So I think that the two main points are that when you do the testing, you know that the product, the application or website that you're working on, it just works. And the second main point is that it works in the way you expect it to. So as you guys probably, some of you might know, when you develop something, you might run into the situation where, from the code point of view, it looks all fine. You coded the method. It takes the inputs and gives you the output, but sometimes it's about the timing. Sometimes it's all about the encrypted small things that might interfere with whatever there is in the flow of what you're testing, or how you expect the given functionality to work. And I think this is where Cypress shines. It essentially, when it comes to browser testing, whatever you can open in the browser, and nowadays it's a lot of things, you can test it with Cypress. So if I take you to the next one, so why is testing essential? Well, it's not, but I think you should do it because it helps you get the quality of your product up to the standard you expect. And again, if you do any sort of updates, any sort of modifications along the way, it happens more often than we would like it to happen, where something breaks because of the change, and we might think it should be fine because this value is expected, but then when we get to actually use the product, it might fall apart. And again, ensuring and putting things like Cypress into the project and using it helps us with that quality, and helps with ensuring that user experience is up to the level, because we know 100% that it's going to work. And for example, if we have a user journey where a user can sign up or register on the website, you can all code it and test it with Cypress, and you will know 100% that it's guaranteed that if Cypress passes it, it fully works. Because what Cypress is, at the end of the day, what Cypress is going to be doing for you is essentially emulate what the user would do. So it would interact with the browser in the same way that user would do. So it would click on the elements, it will drag on them, it will fill in the forms, and essentially emulate that as much as possible, thanks to the integration with the browser. So why would we want to test with Cypress? There are a few other options out there. Some of you might have heard about Selenium. Essentially, there's a bunch of other libraries and frameworks that kind of offer you the end-to-end testing with the browsers, but how most of them do it is essentially in the way that they piggyback to the browser, and they essentially emulate the surface area of the browser to do all the clicking and interacting with the elements. This poses some of the issues where they are not as quick. There might be some issues with identifying how animations work and things like that. Whereas I think where Cypress shines, as in compared to things like Selenium, is that it fully integrates with the browser API. It uses in behind the scene, how it runs is it uses the node server and it uses the browser API, and it fires up the browser, and you can configure it and use it to, you know, test across multiple browsers or test it, you know, on one. And essentially it will identify any sort of thing. So like CSS animations, JavaScript animations, it's all kind of pre-built within the Cypress engine. So it kind of works right out of the box. Like, for example, if you have an accordion element on the page and you click on it, you would have an animation that opens up that accordion. Let's say, for instance, that the animation is set to 2 seconds, and after 2 seconds, all the content within the accordion is now visible. And for instance, the content of that accordion is going to be a form that you fill in and submit. So with things like Selenium, you would have to code in some sort of waiters, and essentially other softwares wouldn't be able to identify when the animation for that accordion finished. And you would have to kind of manually work around it. With Cypress, it kind of works all out of the box. As with any, you know, any testing and browser stuff, there's some quirkiness, but it's more around the, you know, working with native DOM and how it integrates. And Cypress is doing a great job. So because of that, because how it's configured with the API, it's very fast. Now, in terms of using Cypress, it's fairly, the learning curve is very small, in my opinion. Essentially, all you need is basic DOM knowledge and basic JavaScript / jQuery knowledge. So, and I'm going to show it in my demos in a few minutes. The way you use Cypress, the way you interact with elements is as if you were writing a simple jQuery to target elements. So you can target them by data attribute element, you can target them by class, or you can target them by ID. And Cypress, and this is the statement that the creators of Cypress did, is that they want it to be fully JavaScript. So everything, how Cypress integrates, how Cypress extends, how it works is through the JavaScript and purely JavaScript. So nothing else is there in terms of what you would have to install, configure other languages, libraries, and things like that. I think it's very versatile. You can extend it. So you can write your own plugins that would, you know, do that, some sort of automation right out of the box, or some sort of setup. Let's say you have a large application that requires some sort of authentications, or you have one component that is reused across you know, most of the pages or view screens of your applications. You can pre-build a plugin that would do a sort of the meta load and do whatever the procedures you needed to do before, you know, your particular testing starts. It's very easy to integrate with you know, continuous integrations. It kind of works right out of the box with minimal configuration with Travis on GitHub. You can easily set it up with your Docker. It offers parallelization. You can do stab, spice, and clocks on it. So again, it offers you right out of the box identification of the animations and how they take, but you might have some sort of custom waiters, you know, page loaders, things like that. So it offers you the time manipulation and fast forwarding and things like that, which is another great benefit of it. So to install and get started with Cypress is literally those two commands. So we have npm install -d Cypress, and then to start it up is npx Cypress open. And I can show you really quick how it would work. If I do it, can you see my terminal now, or you still see my presentation?
I still see your presentation at the moment.
Oh, okay, let me do this. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so just to demo it really quick. This one, this one. All right, so essentially what I did is I used the Get Started tutorial, which I highly recommend you guys check out after my presentation. I will also give you all the links to all the resources with educational material on how to get started with Cypress, which like their documentation and basic introduction is extremely useful and easy. They have a bunch of videos as well. So essentially what this is it's a basic website application that I got started, and I can run the Cypress on it. If I switch to my Chrome, can you see my Chrome now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, do you see my window with Cypress on it?
Yeah, we can see that.
Awesome. So that's essentially what I just started. So Cypress comes in with sort of an application which is installs on your machine. In this case, on Mac, you started with command line. It offers you a basic GUI with a bunch of things. But essentially, what we can see here is all the specs that I currently have on the project that I work on. So this is the demo application. As I said, if I quickly open it in the browser, project, not this one. Sorry, I have too many tabs open. Here it is. Okay, so that's the demo application. It's sort of a glorified Twitter application where a user can log in and leave comments. That's about it. So what we see here is the bunch of Cypress tests written for that application. And I can run one of those specs and show you how essentially Cypress carries out the testing. So I think one of the interesting ones is if we run the login spec. So essentially how user would attempt to log in. Do you see my Chrome browser now?
Yeah, that's
awesome.
doing stuff.
Cool. So we have essentially two scenarios in the spec. So we are essentially testing a login on that application, and we have a test which verifies that if wrong credentials are entered into the login screen, we will not be able to log in, and then if we enter correct credentials, we will be able to log in. So we can do things like, if I break it down really quickly for you, we have a request that we make to a specific URL, then we get redirected to it, and again there are a bunch of sections, and this goes in line with what I said before of how we can extend Cypress. So if your application and the screens but the specs you're going to be running, in this case login, if there is some precondition to be achieved, we can have it in before all, so it happens on every page. So if we were to, for example, test the member area on this application, on each one of those case scenarios, we would have a small batch of procedures to be executed before the actual test happens. So another interesting thing that Cypress is able to do, so I can run the Cypress with extra command, and it can essentially record entire video of the test you just saw, and it runs really quickly. Like most of the time, you can't even see what happens. That's how quickly it goes. But in here, we can essentially do our breakpoints and step through each single step that Cypress actually is doing. So what happens here, which is another interesting thing, is so we get redirected to the page, which is in this case homepage, and then the Cypress is clicking on sign in link, and this is the click. And if you see when I highlight, when I click, when I pin that step, Cypress offers me before and after. So as Cypress runs, it it essentially creates a snapshot of DOM. So it takes the screenshot, and then again, you can save it. And again, you can record the whole video. So you don't have to use any external software. You just use the command. It's all built in, which I find very, very useful. So Cypress just attempts to go through each one of those steps. And as I mouse over, we can exactly see what happened. So each item gets highlighted, and you can see how Cypress targets those elements on the page as well. So the input field was just targeted through input type email, and so on and so on. And like I said, the offering of targeting is equivalent to how XPath and jQuery targets. So you can do it with anything that would work in the browser, because that's essentially how Cypress does that. So yeah, that's basically basic kind of overview of how Cypress works. And if I jump back to my presentation. Okay, so one thing I wanted to highlight is essentially that you can do those procedures synchronously. You can as well, wait for page loads and unloads if there are some things like when you test AJAX requests and things like that. Again, Cypress supports that. In fact, and again, this is sort of copy paste from Cypress documentation page. They state that Cypress will never miss. It's impossible for Cypress to miss elements when it fires events, which is just great. So you can never have to worry about, and which is the case with things like Selenium and things like that, because you would do custom things. Cypress kind of gets rid of that. So DOM querying, if I give you a quick overview, again, you can command chain, same thing. If you know jQuery, that's you can piggyback dot something, or you can traverse through DOM using find command, using triggering events. You can do assertions, and as I mentioned before, you have timeouts, so waits and things like that. So that's how you would target elements using CY. Essentially is equivalent to the $sign in jQuery. It's the main object that allows you to tap into the entire library. And again, documentation lists all the different methods you can use, but that's the basic thing. So we have get. Again, I'm for example, here I'm targeting the element with ID main content. Inside it, I'm finding a element with class article, and then I am finding any children elements that are image with source of static, and I'm finding the first one of that. Again, first can be replaced with last or add, and there are other things. So you essentially chain it the same way you would do in jQuery. Now, interesting thing to note is that Cypress do not offer things like hover. It does support things like onFocus. So for example, if you were to validate that a given form input has a specific CSS style onFocus, you can do that. With hover, it's a bit trickier, but you can still achieve that using the inbuilt trigger method. And trigger works around the mouse state events, so mouse down, mouse dragging, mouse over, and so on and so on. What else we have here? The interesting bit is that you can integrate, and Cypress comes in and supports Mocha and Chai. I never personally use Chai, but how I am using it nowadays on Sage Carbon project is with Cucumber and with the Gherkin scenario syntax. So essentially, if I quickly jump into small